AITA for saying I didn't want my fiance's best friend to be best man? I am not the OOP. OOP is you, ill atmosphere 1064. AITA for saying I didn't want my fiance's best friend to be best man? Originally to R. AITAH. Original post August 2nd, 2023. My fiance Grant, 29M, and I, 27F, have been dating for years. I knew I wanted to marry him about a year in, but he's been wishy-washy about the marriage. His best friend Keith, 28M, is married to a friend of mine, Hannah. Since we were 20, Keith was a rude, jealous person who hated me. He hated all of Grant's girlfriends. I tried telling Grant the reason he had no other friends than Keith was because Keith chased everyone around away. For example, I once wore something cute for a date. Keith told me I looked like the garbage can they had. Grant insisted Keith didn't mean to be rude. Grant wanted my friends to hang out with him and Keith when I just wanted Grant there. I relented. I regretted it when the first time they met my friends Keith was so rude he reduced Hannah to tears. It was so over the top that even he had to later apologize and made it up to her. My fiancé and I were discussing the wedding. He insisted that Keith had to be his best man. I refused. I said Keith could be a groomsman, but I did not want that man symbolizing love. Grant got mad and said he had to return the favor as he was Keith's best man and I was Hannah's bridesmaid. I stood my ground and he threw up his hands and said he would never get married. Edit. It's not one situation. I was using those to illustrate how his best friend is in general. He's mean and rude in general. He ate a slice of my birthday cake that Grant made before I even got to see it. When we got engaged, he only said, "Sorry," to Grant. His nickname for me is Frogu because I have a frog personality. Update August 12th, 2023. So this probably isn't the update people were hoping for. I told Grant all of Keith's awful behaviors and he interrupted me with the same tired excuses. I asked him if it wasn't Keith but some random person, would he see it as innocent? He was silent. I made an ultimatum that we had to go to couples counseling for the marriage to go forward. He agreed. Grant then brought up the wedding. There was a few reasons I didn't want Keith to be best man. One of them was the best man speech. I didn't want to be insulted even subtly on my wedding day. Grant said that if I didn't want Keith to be best man, then no one would be. I said that's fine. Honestly, I wanted to talk this over in couples counseling, but he insisted on rehashing our arguments. He also said that just to be fair, I wouldn't have a maid of honor. I didn't understand this. Frankly, he didn't have a problem with my friends. Grant likes them. It felt like he was doing that to punish me. Then he said that if Keith wasn't invited to the wedding, which isn't what I said at all, then I shouldn't either invite my maid of honor Alice, who's my best friend, or Hannah. Hannah's a bridesmaid, but I don't understand how he dragged her into this besides being Keith's wife. It was a tit for tat situation. I think he was trying to make me back down by issuing ultimatums. It backfired because Grant told Keith about our arguments on him and Hannah not being invited to the wedding, which we hadn't even agreed on. Keith laughed off him not getting invited, but he got really pissed at Grant for uninviting Hannah. He screamed at Grant and basically won't talk to him anymore. Grant is upset because I'm mad at him and Keith is mad at him. I told him to save it for couples counseling because opening his mouth did nothing but ruin the situation. This is way too much drama for a wedding. I don't want this to be the rest of my life and our kids when we have them, and I'm rethinking our marriage. Relevant comments. Low assistance 9231. Did you mention how Keith immediately stood up for his own wife with no hesitation when Grant's been allowing his friend to continually disrespect you? Oop replied. At this point, It's just filed under Keith can do whatever he wants. So like if I said, Keith stood up for Hannah with no hesitation but you won't stand up for me, Grant would say that's different because that's how Keith is and I thought whatever Keith did is bad, so why am I saying what Keith did is right? And then he would say something like Keith didn't have to let me be in his wedding either but I got to be a bridesmaid but you don't want him in our wedding. Which I never said. I said I didn't want him to be best man because of what he might say to me or about me in his speech. Honestly, Keith is our only source of argument. We get along so well without this one thing. But it's such a big thing to move past. And it feels so unfair because as terrible as Keith is, he immediately cut off Grant when Hannah was uninvited. That's his baby. And I wonder why Grant can't do the same for me. COOMENTS from Oop. Oop. I'm having a tough time wrapping my head around Grant being a bad person. He's an elementary school teacher and he goes above and beyond for his students. He volunteers at the homeless shelter. He helped me when I was at my lowest. That's why I think he's a good person. Because he makes these choices. But then I think about Keith and how Grant allows him to disrespect me in so many ways. He's a good person but he's weak. He won't stand up for me. Honestly, if Grant spoke about Hannah the way Keith speaks about me, Keith would be furious. That's what hurts the most. It's not like Keith is that nice to Grant either. He calls him a pushover, weak, and fat, and yet Grant still stands beside him. What good is a person who won't stand up for you? I'm hoping couples counseling will open up his eyes. This is a last-ditch effort to save this relationship. And, oop, Grant's not one of the boys. He's have to have more friends for that. Keith is his only friend that wasn't my friend first or a friend of us together. I'm the opposite of a fan for Keith and Hannah's marriage, but he would stand up for his wife. He's still not talking to Grant after screaming at him. Honestly, the more I think about it, the more I think Grant tries to placate the most stubborn person in any relationship. If it was me versus his mom, who's a sweetheart and a bit of a doormat, he'd take my side because I would stand up for myself. He'd try to make his mom back down and she would. I've never had that happen but I can see it. If it was me versus Keith, Keith is a selfish jerk who's never heard the word no in his life. So Grant would choose Keith and try to make him back down. The ultimatums were to make me back down, I think. This is a repost sub IAM, not the oop. What an absolute clown. Loved the comment pointing out how Keith stood up for Hannah immediately. I genuinely do not understand spouses, or intended spouses, who do not stand up for each other to friends and family. In the only whole family argument that my husband's family has had around me, I walked back into the room to hear, "Don't insult my wife," from my husband. I'm literally grinning thinking about it. Yet, while it delights me, it's also the bare minimum that your spouse would go to bat for you. This is an art room situation, isn't it? Oop, if you ever read this, you're going to marry someone who was born without a spine. He doesn't have the backbone to honor you despite his homies' insults. Keith will always be first in your relationship, so think of this long term. Your fiance will default to him and not you. Just think of every insult that Keith has thrown at you. Your fiance co-signs them with his silence and allows him to step all over you. Marriage counseling can be a crutch but not an immediate cure. I've got to know the story of Keith and Hannah. From a first meeting of tears to a marriage worth dropping your best friend for sounds like an interesting love story. I hope she calls off the wedding. You can't marry someone you see as weak. I'm not even sure how you could maintain a relationship with them. Period. People like Keith are the worst kind of friends, and I don't understand why someone would stay friends, especially with that kind of behavior. He's purely childish and insufferable. Grant doesn't seem to help the situation at all, as he just keeps making excuses for Keith's behavior. Op believes couples counseling would work out, but honestly, I'm not sure how things would end, but hope for the best for Op. I knew I wanted to marry him about a year in, but he's been wishy-washy about the marriage. Always a great sign to begin on. He's been wishy-washy about the marriage. Causes arguments over wedding instead of waiting for counseling. Yeah, dude is a people pleaser who has people pleased himself into a matrimonial corner and is setting fire to everything he loves trying to get out. Oop has a Grant problem, not a Keith problem. Grant is the one with a Keith problem. This lovely couple just needs children to sort out all their issues. In fact, they can name their firstborn, boy or girl, Keith. The extra stress from sleepless nights will help build a strong relationship between them. And if that doesn't work, then open up the marriage. The perfect solution to any pre-married couple's problems. At first I thought this was going to be similar to the "my fiance's asshole best friend pulled a cheating prank at my wedding" situation. But somehow her fiance is even more of a loser than that guy. Really? Why is he even friends with Keith at this point? Why pick someone who seems to low-key hate you as your best man? This is why we say nice guys can be toxic and abusive. Keith told me I look like the garbage can they had. Grant insisted Keith didn't mean to be rude. This sub doesn't allow GIFs to be posted in the comments, so you can just imagine the facepalming for yourself. He goes above and beyond for his students. He volunteers at the homeless shelter. He helped me when I was at my lowest. People need to wrap their heads around the concept that someone can do good or decent things and still not be good. Ted Bundy helped raise his GF's child for years. Was apparently loving and doting to her. He volunteered for a suicide hotline. He supported political campaigns. John Wayne Gacy was a clown for kids' parties. Dennis Rader was a deacon in his church. Married with kids. They were still bad guys. Not that this guy is a serial killer. But if the extreme version of bad can appear good, the much lesser bad certainly can. Just because a guy can be good and decent in some ways does not mean one should ignore the big ways. They aren't good and decent. It's a pretty sad state of affairs when the guy you hate most is a better husband than the man you inexplicably want to marry. Oof. I think I'm seeing something a little different here. I don't think Grant's main issue is that he's a people pleaser. The way he took OOP's words wildly out of context then acted on them was unnerving. If he was a people pleaser, he would have tried to placate everyone. Instead, he antagonized everyone. Grant wasn't listening to Oop. He took her request, Keith not being best man, to the extreme. Him and his wife being uninvited. He made it extreme to make her seem more unreasonable so he could more easily steamroll her requests. Strawmanning. Basically, through his method, she cannot get what she wants. Either Keith is best man or nothing at all. He may have done this intentionally or subconsciously. Not entirely sure what happened with Keith. I would guess he blamed Oop for the decision. But Keith targeted Grant instead of OOP. I could be wrong though. I would bet Grant's father is the same way. Obviously this is just speculation about someone I've never met through second-hand information. So who knows? Oh god, I'm getting art room vibes again. Oop main problem here is her fiance. First and foremost, even the best friend instantly defended his wife. Even without all the Keith drama. The first paragraph was telling. Why would Oop want to marry someone who is wishy-washy about marrying them?
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Aircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.